Hey, Shalom, Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash, double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, for teaching us his truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aqua, them and listen. May the blessing of election be upon you and your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick Lord's Will is always an edifying lesson, and for today's lesson, I want to go through a quick article that I came across in regards to, the U.S. and U.K. Trump. It says here, Trump tells Stammer, help not needed, even as U.S. uses U.K. Bases for Iran strikes. Right. So essentially, Trump is basically becoming like an asshole and for lack of better words, in regards to the situation towards his allies, and towards specifically the UK and specifically, right, and then there's been many different cases and situations where certain actions that was done by the US, and essentially it looked very, they kind of, the UK or Britain, they looked very they were kind of like ashamed at America's behavior, right? So a good example is the recent situation with in regards to Venezuela, right? And the actions, they were seen by the UK at that time, they weren't so favorable. And I'm just using that as an example. There's been multiple different examples of the US's actions towards certain foreign policies and certain decisions that they made, and then they were looked very unfavorably by the world stage. But America has that. It's essentially like the hammer of the earth. You know what I'm saying? So they come down with an aggressive, and they have that military power to essentially back it up too. So there's no one to basically kind of like humble or check them, on the world stage. So what I'll do is, I want to read a little bit through this, and just provide some more understanding, and understand that also America is causing, you know not just in, I guess, in a physical sense, but like you see the way the relations of America is souring between their own closest allies, their own closest friends, right? And we know, pursuant to prophecy, a lot of their allies, those horns that you read about in Revelation 17, a lot of those allies are going to turn on America, right, and burn her desolate, and turn her into, essentially use their nuclear capabilities to get their own lick back and their own vengeance upon America as well. So, right, so we're starting to see a little, like, more and more of that as the years go on, right? Why a lot of these nations have a strong distaste for the whore, which is America, right? So, I'll read a little bit of this here, and Lord's will, this will be edifying. This is on theguardian.com. And it says Trump has renewed his stinging criticism for the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer over lack of immediate UK support for the US Israeli strikes on Iran. It says, and quote, the United Kingdom, our once great ally, maybe the greatest of them all, is finally giving serious thought to sending 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East, he wrote on social media platform. That's okay, Prime Minister Stammer. We don't need them any longer, but we will remember we don't need people to join wars after we already won. So essentially, Trump has a very boastful attitude as you see these things continue to perpetuate, and it's souring a lot of the different relations. Like, you can't, like, if that's your closest, like, say the example is your close buddy and your close friend, there's a certain way you're not gonna talk to your allies, and Trump doesn't understand that because he has a very, very prideful sort of mentality, like no one can't tell him anything, right? So I wanted to read this actually, you know in the book of Sirach. It kind of goes into, a little bit about, friends, but I wanted to actually use this to kind of illustrate what's going on the world stage between America and the UK here, as well as a lot of their own allies, because a lot of their own allies don't feel this strong connection towards America because of the way Trump, the way Trump speaks to his own allies. This is Sirach chapter 22, verse 22 here. And it says, if thou open thy mouth against thy friend, fear not, for there may be a reconciliation, except for upbraiding or pride or disclosing of secrets or a treacherous wound. For these things even every friend will depart. So let me get this in the GNT as well, just for edification as well. Just bear with me and let me just pull this up. Okay, actually, let me start at verse 20 here. And it says, Sirach 22, verse 20. It says here, if you throw rocks at birds, you will scare them away. If you insult a friend, you will break up the friendship. If you have a violent argument with a friend and speak sharply, that's a key point here, because Trump's been warned over and over again of how, I forgot who it was, I don't know if it was during this administration or the administration before, about essentially there was somebody that was saying, and if brothers know, you can put it in the comments, reminding him like this, you can't speak to your allies there's a certain way you have to speak to your allies. So essentially he speaks to them in a sort of way that it can be very condescending, like you don't need them. It's kind of like a woman that just has very, very lewd behavior, and people are just trying to get rid of her and get out of her presence. You know what I'm saying? So here it says, I'll read verse 21 again, and it says, and if you have a violent argument with a friend and speak sharply, all is not lost. You can still make up with him, but any friend will leave you if you insult him, if you're arrogant. And Trump, that's one of his biggest, problems, because he's not a type of person that actually can, give off any an element of like humility. He doesn't give off that sort of type of character, right? And it says here, and that's really the balance too, because if you're a king, a king, even like I'm just thinking about King David as an example. King David, yes, he was a man of war, but he was also, after the Lord, he was after the Most High's heart, right? When you think about it, and even when situations came to him, like for example with the situation between him and Nathan the prophet, and Nathan gave him and told him that counsel, not counsel, I'm sorry, but told him, that parable, he humbled himself, right? He completely humbled himself. He realized, like, yes, I transgressed, so on and so forth. He mourned, and he was more in a sorrowful state. He didn't puff his chest up or anything like that, right? So that's the difference between, the balance between a king that's more righteous versus these kings that you see that ruling the earth right now, because they don't possess any element of actual humility, right? They're very, very staunch, especially America as a whole, and that's why a lot of these nations don't like America, right? I just thought I would bring that up. And it says, but any friend will leave you if you insult him, or if you're arrogant, if you reveal his secrets, or if you turn on him unexpectedly, right? So this is, this is the withering away of friendship, and a lot of it is because of America's actions, right? Um, through different examples of different foreign policy, America has been seen as, leaving certain, what's the word I'm looking for? They leave a bad taste, in the mouth of other countries, and even their own allies is like, yo, this doesn't look good, but this is but eventually, pursuing the prophecy, a lot of their nation, those nations, those allies are going to turn on them and turn on America, right? So it says here, going back to the article, it says the put down comes after the U.S. said it would allow U.S. forces to use bases in Fairford, Gloucestershire, and Diego Garcia, the Indian Ocean, for specific and limited defense purpose. So it says Trump's statement comes hours after the UK Ministry of Defense announced that 4 U.S. bombers had landed in the Royal Air Force in Britain on Friday, Saturday, and already started using British bases to carry out operations to prevent Iran firing missiles into the region, which is putting British lives at risk, right? So they're not essentially considering that their own actions, but you see how a lot of these, nations are slowly being pulled, towards war, right? And the handling of these things, America, not even America, but the state of Israel is slowly, drawing these nations in, for, World War III, right? That third woe that is spoken about in Revelation, right? Let me get Jeremiah, because I said that. This is Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 20, and it says, "Therefore hear the counsel of the Lord Yahweh, Bashmel Shai, that he hath taken against Edom and his purposes, and he hath proposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them." So the Lord's going to use the state of Israel to pull these nations, into that third woe or that third war, right? So you start to see they're being pulled together essentially for the controversy of Zion, right? For that, final, that final war, right? So, you see that, and Trump is, Trump only cares about the welfare of, essentially the state of Israel, right? They don't actually care about the welfare of their own allies. So it just says they're putting their own British allies at risk, just like Trump is putting America's concerns at risk as well, right? Because you see with certain sentiments, like that video that was circulating where, their own people, they don't even want to go and fight, on the behalf of Israel, right? And it says, continuing on, it says here, the state also comes after British officials were preparing war aircraft carrier to possible deployment in the Middle East amid rising tensions linked between the United States, Israel, and Iran. And it says the UK Defense Ministry said, the HMS Prince of Wales has always been on very high readiness, and we are increasing the preparedness of the carrier, reducing the time it would take to set sail for any deployment. It says members of Starmer's Labour Party have been cautious about military involvement in the war. Critics of the UK government claim that Prime Minister has put domestic electoral concerns before a foreign policy, that traditional values and special relationship with the US, right? So there's a lot of rift going on, and they don't have the close. Their friendship is just basically just withering away, right? Let me get this actually in as well in Jeremiah, because a lot of the actions that you see that's actually being done by the US is not always looked very favorably, especially by Britain, because they were that country that we know those colonies they broke off and then they set sail, I should say, to America to establish their own country, right? And it was established back in 1776. This is Jeremiah 15 and 12, and it says, "Your mother shall be sore confounded, she that bare you shall be ashamed," right? So that country is that mother that's spoken of is Britain, right? Where you had, just like I said before, those you had those colonies back then. They decided, okay, we're not going to deal with the administration of that time, so we're going to come and establish our own thing, our own country, right? And eventually it is known as what we know as America today. And it says, "Behold, the hindermost of the nations shall be a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert," right? So America's fate is to be completely turned into a complete desert, through those nuclear fire that's going to completely engulf it, right? So that's the judgment that is written and prophesied for America, for it to become a desert where there's only going to be certain like creatures that are just going to be dwelling there, and that's going to be America's fate, right? So moving on here, because there was even more examples, in the way, they handle certain things back in like in the 80s under Margaret Thatcher, how they handle certain relations within the Caribbean. So it's not just like the Maduro situation. There's just been a culmination of different examples of America's actions, right? Essentially, as when Habakkuk said, they're neither keepeth at home, right? They've always been in other countries' businesses, and it's left a very strange taste, a shameful taste to in the eyes of Britain, especially, right? Because they don't look at America as a country that is they looked at it, it's like a horse not bridled, basically. That's basically how they look at America. But you know, that's pretty much it. One second, let me see if I can get. There was something in Proverbs. One second. This is Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16, and it says, "These 6 things doth the Lord Yahweh Bashim Shai hate. The 7th are an abomination unto him: a proud look, a lying tongue," and that's something that Trump has. He has a very, very proud look. Like it also says in Jeremiah, "I'm against thee, O most proud," right? It says, "Hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running into mischief, a false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren." So Trump is he's running into mischief, because why are you getting involved in this in the affairs of these other nations? But that's it's all the Lord's will for them to be pulled into this grand situation that's going on, this grand prophecy of gathering the nations for the controversy of Zion, right? So just wanted to read a little bit of that, this real quick. But Lord's will, this lesson was quick and edifying, and I'd just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.